Good evening, and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Katie from Greenlight, and we're thrilled to host tonight's event with Chloe Shaw presenting her new book, What is a Dog? She will be talking with Molly Jong fast, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Chloe, Molly, and the team at Flatiron Books for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping things to go over. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and you can see a count of fellow attendees on the top of your Zoom screen, but the exact location will depend on what kind of device you're using. There are a couple of different ways that you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and to interact with fellow attendees. So if you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that in the Q&A module, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program, so please make sure you're putting your questions there and not in the chat. And importantly, tonight's featured book, What is a Dog, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person in our bookstore locations from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day of the week, and you can purchase Chloe's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll be dropping the buy link in the chat in just a moment. Greenlight will donate 20% of sales of What is a Dog during the week of the event through August 18th to local nonprofit No Kill Shelter, Sean Casey Animal Rescue. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Our interviewer for tonight is Molly Jong. She is an editor-at-large at the Daily Beast and a columnist at Vogue and the Daily Beast. She will be speaking with our featured author, Chloe Shaw. Chloe lives in Connecticut with her husband, 2 kids, and 2 dogs. What is a Dog is her literary debut. It is a meditation on one woman's life through the dogs she's loved and lost. The book has been praised by such acclaimed writers as Lee Montgomery, John Irving, Lynn Cox, and Jim Shepard, who says, "What is a dog is at once finely observed and wrenchingly tender tribute to a spectacularly beloved and lovable dog, a penetratingly smart meditation on what dogs mean to us, and a stirring account of one woman's transformation." Chloe is going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Molly and with all of you. Please take it away, Chloe.
Thank you. So I'm going to be reading, the only thing I have to say before I read is that Booker and Safari, Booker was our dog that we had to put down in 2015 at age 15, and Safari we got when Booker was 8 years old. And so you'll hear about both of them in this section. It's mostly about Safari though, who's now 13. Can dogs and humans exist without love? Yes. But not thrive. That seems to be the pivotal trait domestication bred. Wild animals don't need love to thrive, not in the human definition anyway. They need roles to fulfill, systems to carry out, orders to follow. But an animal living among humans understands that love, or the lack thereof, has consequences and learns to live within its sturdy sway. What helped Safari most, of course, was also the reason the rescue we adopted him from was so thrilled with our application. We had an elder dog. Safari had in his arsenal the great Bowie Buddy, the most loyal lifeline of all, Booker. For the first 7 years of his life anyway, it's impossible to talk about Safari without talking about the great big beast in whom Safari found his inner dog. He followed Booker everywhere. He learned from Booker that it was fine to be off leash in the woods, but you never want to get too far. You never want to get so dog about it that you go completely wolf and lose your humans for good. He learned from Booker that getting in the car almost always meant good things. Walks in the woods or by the water, getting to go with a family on vacation rather than being left at home. He learned his own limitations from Booker, too. The one place Safari wouldn't follow Booker was into the water, and Booker couldn't pass a body of water without fully jumping in. So Safari learned to walk in up to his dew claws and dutifully pace the shore while his comrade went for a dip. Like the presence of any young life, Safari's youth brought out more of Booker's, and in one of the most vivid, moving examples of love and trust I've ever seen, Booker gradually coaxed Safari out of his shell. He, not we, taught Safari to trust his humans, to love his humans, and in turn allow himself to be loved. While I hope there are plenty of dogs still to come, if everyone has that one dog, that heart dog, that dog that's meant to be, mine is unequivocally Safari's, or Safi, as we sometimes call him. Yes, I feed him and care for him. He knows he needs me. And though I would like to think that it's laser beam love that draws him to me during thunderstorms and when we're navigating a house that's not ours, a place he's never been before, science tells me it's something closer to instinct. But add a little heart to that science, and I feel like his twin and his mother. When he flees to me. I am his one person, his heart girl, the human that was meant to be. I think of Safari as a dog who sometimes, like me, pretends to be a dog, but is really, like me, quite human. He often seems to me like he's faking the whole being a dog business. While walking him recently, I stopped, so he did too. Want a sniff? I asked. I very much believe in not rushing dogs on walks, letting them sniff to their heart's content, lighting up those nose and brain receptors like crossword puzzles do for the elderly. He understands what this means and so veers off the path a little to sniff some grass, but it's like he's just playing the part, not even looking at it or taking in the nose-boggling information the grass is giving him. He keeps his nose there for what seems like the dog-appropriate amount of time, then looks at me as unmoved as a human who just sniffed grass. Was that enough, his eyes go? Am I dog enough for you now? When we walk on the local public trails, he never takes his eyes off the creepy psychos, totally normal people, around us, but neither do I. They're all creepy psychos. He once came out of the woods behind our house with a baby bunny in his mouth. Not even this was convincing. I told him to drop it, and he did with such haste. It was as if he was filled with relief, like he'd been thinking, good God, who do I think I am? For Christ's sake, someone take this dear babe off my fangs. Occasionally, he looks at his paws with disgust, as if he's embarrassed they're not hands. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if I unzipped his fur only to find a little human. Sometimes, when I'm writing, he walks over and hooks one of his paws over my arm. When I look at him and say, hey buddy, what's happening? What's the scoop? He looks at me with such enormous vibrating eyes that I still believe he'll start talking in full sentences one day. And in which language? I feel pretty certain Safari is Welsh, the same way I'm betting that Booker was French Canadian. Booker, likely the genial, strapping captain of a downhill ski team, and Safari, an earnest, self-effacing, barely audible tour guide in Cardiff. Both swear like trucks. I've read their dating profiles too. Booker. Big-hearted, totally undiscerning wolf dog looking for more love to lean on. I don't care who. Peed in your pants? I bet your crotch smells awesome. Oh, and I've got a huge tongue. Just saying. DM me, mes amis. Safari. Gorgeous. My mom's words, not mine. Husky collie mix, looking for mellow, risk-free adventures. No, let's not say adventures. Let's say running fun circles in the safety of our own yards. I enjoy tennis balls, but only ones that the lawnmower has viciously split in two, preferably not all the way through, but almost all the way through, so that they fetchingly flap. I can't promise you a rose garden, but I will softly smudge the back of your knees with the damp velvet of my nose as you carry my food bowl to its stand. Anyone? If not, no big whoop.
am I supposed to interview you now? Are we at interview period? Are we at the interview time?
Yes.
That was amazing. I sort of I felt myself welling up. I
Oh,
don't know why dogs are such an emotional subject for us. Why do you think that is?
um, I think in my experience, as an only child, I really bonded with my dogs, especially my main childhood dog, Agatha, who was a Scottish Terrier. And I just feel like they can carry us in these times of, I mean, of all emotions, really. Um, I know a lot of people have brought home dogs in this time of pandemic, and we'll see what's to come of that. But I think just having this loving vessel who kind of absorbs emotions, rather than deflects them, which I think humans can often do. Um, that's been my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I, I, I mean, I feel very similar about my dogs, and I'm also an only child.
Yeah,
So I do relate to that. And my childhood dog, I mean, I remember putting down my childhood dog as the one of the most profound and awful experiences of my life.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
You've
you,
had dogs your whole life?
oh yeah. Dog. When I was a baby, my parents had Buffy and Pooch. Buffy was actually a Connecticut story. So June Havoc,
Yeah.
who was the baby June Havoc, who was the daughter of this famous burlesque dancer.
Okay.
She had Cannon Crossing, which was an animal shelter, and so we got a dog from there.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, so when did you start this book, and how did you start this book? What is a dog?
So I wrote an essay of the same title. It was about 2 years, I think, after Booker, who's on the cover, died. And yeah, that's Booker. And he was my husband's dog, before I met them. I met them on the same day. So I was lucky enough to come into their orbit at the same moment. And Booker was, I think, 6 at the time. And yeah, so he died when in 2015. And it was the first death, honestly, that I really showed up for. I'd lost grandparents, I'd lost a cousin, I'd certainly lost people, but I kind of didn't know how to show up for those deaths. It was kind of too overwhelming. I mean, I showed up physically, but not emotionally, I would say. And Booker's death was the first thing. I mean, I was like fully in charge of it. I was planning for it. We had a vet. Luckily, our vet was willing to come to our backyard. My husband and I dug this giant grave. I mean, he was a really big dog. So, we dug a grave. We decided to bury him in our backyard. And so we both took turns even digging the grave. And, I was doing all the vet visits. So it was kind of the first uh, death and like mourning that I was fully present for, I would say.
Yeah.
And so a couple years later, I finally wrote about it. I wrote about him and kind of all the feelings around that experience. And it got published in the American Scholar, and the book, there was a book editor read the essay and actually approached me, so that felt very lucky. But yeah, that's how I started writing about it.
It's such a, I feel myself like you're getting teary too, because it is such a profound relationship, and it has so much loss in it. I mean,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just relate to it. So, what happened after you put that dog to sleep?
Meaning literally, like,
Yeah. Did you get another dog? What's your sort of take? How do you do that?
so, so we said goodbye to him, and he's still in our backyard. We visit him. We plant flowers every spring. Um, and Safari, who I just read about, he is now 13, but he, that was an intense experience too, because it was actually um, helping him through that loss, because Booker had been kind of his compass. I mean, we became his compass as well, luckily, but Booker was his best bud. Um, and so, watching that goodbye was uh, pretty brutal, but also really important, I feel like. You know, our vet very smartly suggested that because they were so connected and Safari was so connected to him, we brought Safari out to visit him after he was dead, and it was actually it was beautiful. Animals, we kind of experience everything in our human ways, but animals definitely have their own ways. And Safari kind of visited him, and it just was clear that he understood something about it. And he came back to us, and he just didn't go back to Booker's body, and but yeah, so we had Safari for another, let's see, it was a year and a half, I think, and then we got another puppy, Otter.
And what's Otter like?
Otter is so in the book, I have these chapter titles. So Booker was the dog of marriage, because that's how I met my husband.
Right.
Safari's the dog of motherhood, because I felt like his mother, but also I had my two kids in that time. And Otter, I call him the dog of reckoning, because he I he's just a lovely, incredible dog, but I say in this in the book, he's the most dog I've ever had. He's taught me how to actually not totally anthropomorphize everything. And he's actually like living with a wolf. I'm like, oh, okay, we have a wild animal in the house. Not that he's like out of control, but he's more just um I'm trying to think of how to describe him. He's a very sensitive guy, and so living with humans it's more of a, instead of like a kind of comforting thing with Booker and Safari, he's a bit more like he needs to really learn how to deal with like two kids running through the house, or just something surprising. So he's a sensitive soul.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
What do you think, what do you think our connection with people love to read about dogs too? And I'm curious to know, I mean, there's like this old joke that like the most popular topics for books are Abraham Lincoln and dogs, right? So the most successful book would be a story of Abraham Lincoln's dog. Why do you think, and I remember growing up, like my favorite book was these James Harriet stories.
Totally. Me too. Yes.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah. So I wonder why you think we are so obsessed with the dog literature too.
I think because it gets us out of our human selves, we just we need that escape, and we need that, if I get this right, I think I say something in my book about like just being like kind of heartbroken. And
Yeah.
sorry to keep going to this sad place, but it's just, I feel like dogs are both such vessels of love and grief the same way humans are. But I think we also put all that, we ask this of them.
Yeah.
And I think I say something like, uh, I wish we could be more like dogs. We hide our broken hearts in shame, but the dog becomes the broken heart.
Yeah.
I feel like they absorb um, so much of us and are so forgiving and also grateful. And I just feel that right back, you know?
I I had all these sick dogs this summer. So I had one dog that became diabetic, and then the other dog got pancreatitis and had to have a feeding tube. And
Oh no.
so I was just but I became very obsessed with our vet.
Yeah.
Do you find that this is normal? Tell me this is normal, and talk to me about because it sounds like you also have a pretty close relationship with your vet.
Yeah. So vets are my heroes,
Okay.
basically. I mean, I'll just say that right now. Um, oh, all they deal with, and especially this past year and a half, just with, so many people um, giving up their pets, but also bringing new pets home. Um, yeah, so Heather Reif was Booker's vet, and she's the one who euthanized him in our backyard. And I'll forever be so grateful to her for coming here and taking care of him. She had a really special relationship with him. Um, and we have a newer vet, Kim McClure, and she actually got me through. So my older dog Safari, who's 13, had 4 teeth taken out this
Oh,
past year, and I was so nervous about putting him under anesthesia.
your old hat with the teeth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and it went beautifully, and he did great. So yeah, I do. Vets are, I don't know. They're my heroes, really, truly. Like, I
As
mean, yeah.
yeah. As we're talking, if you guys in the audience want to type in questions, you're going to have question time, but this is like some good time to start thinking about what you want to talk to us about with dogs and vets, and
Yeah.
what what that's all like. So please ask away questions. I do think, you and I went to grad school together, though I think you were like a year ahead of me.
I think it was 1 year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's interesting, like I see I see a very, your style is very, is very poetic in a way, and I'm curious to know like how those writers that taught you in that MFA program sort of affected you.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I got my MFA in fiction, and I really have been working on that for the last couple of decades. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I wrote that essay that you asked me about Booker. And it just kind of, I think, writing from myself instead of coming up with some fictionalized version, um, it really broke something open in me that felt just like such a relief and a release, I guess. Being able to just speak from myself, and uh, and then having this book come along, and I spent 2.5 years writing this, and I have 6 drafts, I guess, and it was hard, it was a hard, the beginning especially, just trying to figure out what belonged in the book about myself. Like, I never planned on writing a memoir ever. But that said, once I was speaking from my own self, it just felt so much better. And, I was saying to my husband not long ago, I wonder if I'm ever going to write fiction again. And he had a really great line of saying, well, I also wonder if this will make your fiction even better. So, yeah.
It is interesting how there's just, I mean, this may not always be true, but it's interesting how like nonfiction is just the world is more open to nonfiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that may not always be true, but
No, but I think it's true. Like I feel like I could stop any person on the street and be like, tell me your story. And I would be fascinated by whatever they said. So I feel like the more stories, the better, the more human stories. It's not that I still love fiction, obviously, um, but I do kind of feel like everyone has their story and they're all important.
and it feels like people want to read stuff that happened,
Yeah.
which is weird to me because in MFA programs and in that world that I came from,
Yeah.
I always thought people wanted to read novels, but it
Right.
seemed like there's a real shift.
Well, in your first book, Normal Girl, I mean, that was
Novel-ish.
right.
Novel,
No, and yes,
yeah.
I understand.
But yes, but no, but I mean, I went from novels to nonfiction, so I'm very,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel very, I like nonfiction much better because you don't have to write about yourself, even though novels aren't supposed to be about yourself. I feel like there's so much like having to sort of deal with what's in there in a novel, whereas if you're writing a book about, whatever, it's not as emotionally charged. So this is very emotionally charged. So,
What did you end up getting your MFA in? Was it fiction or nonfiction?
it was fiction. I don't know. I got it.
I
Maybe
know, I was there, but
well, it was nonfiction. I think it was fiction.
I think it was fiction, right?
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
fiction.
Yeah.
But, I
But
mean,
that shift it's an interesting.
I was talking to ZZ Packer on the phone yesterday, who writes a lot of
Sure.
really good fiction.
Yeah.
And I want her to write this nonfiction book. And I was saying, you don't, and she was saying, there are these people who really, like, I think we all feel a little bit sense, that there are people who do nonfiction. But the truth is that being a fiction writer in a lot of ways and going into nonfiction is a huge advantage because because what you don't realize about nonfiction is that there is very little the quality of the prose is not important
Okay.
way to nonfiction authors, and that's really not fair. It's late. I mean, what I mean to say is a lot of nonfiction journalists don't focus on prose the way that fiction journalists do. So you have a huge advantage when you go into nonfiction because you are much more interested in prose. And so your prose tends to be more poetic, and it tends to be that people are so delighted to read something where the prose are really tight, and it is a huge advantage. So that's not to say there aren't incredible nonfiction writers. I mean, there are incredible nonfiction writers, but it's just to say that prose, that focus on prose is, I think, for some reason, for fiction writers, a little bit more focused, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. You guys, we need questions. I'm looking for questions. I need questions. Otherwise, I am going to ask more questions. So everyone needs to type in questions. Oh, good. Here we go. Yes. All right. We're getting some good questions here. Oh, there are two. Oh, it's my bad. I was in the wrong place. I blame myself, but also everyone else. Wait, hold on. There are two questions in the Q&A. Hold on. I'm in the wrong place. This is one of the great things is that I've done this a number of times. I can't figure out what I'm doing. Okay, here we go. Yay. All right. Can I wait? It's only 8 o'clock. Is it? I need to get the permission from the ladies at Greenlight. Am I okay to ask to start with the Q&A? I think I am. I think they're nodding. Okay, let's go. All right. So this is from John. My dog is my inspiration. I aspire to be the kind of person my dog thinks I am. Do either of you have similar feelings about your dogs?
Oh, yes. My dog Safari that I read about earlier, I mean, I feel like we are the same, just in dog and human form. So he's my inspiration every day. And, you know, I have a lot of anxiety. He has a lot of anxiety. And the fact that he just like embraces each day is my biggest inspiration every day, honestly. He just goes out despite being terrified of a lot of things. I feel like is my experience too. Yes.
That's amazing. My dogs, well, Spartacus is my diabetic who's like not so well and has trouble keeping up with the other two. So Spartacus is my dog, you know, in the family, everyone has their, so Spartacus is my dog. So, and he has, you know, he's wearing a diaper and he can't, I mean, this dog is, yeah, well, he's got terrible diabetes. And so, and even though it's controlled with insulin. So this is my dog. And so I feel very, you know, he shows up, he tries to do the walk, he can't keep up with everyone else. Like, that's me, man. Like, you know, or at least that's what I wish I were like, is like the person who shows up and can't, you know, is still cheerful and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So that is my, that's my absolute, Spartacus is my.
How old is he?
So they're about 10 and a half.
Okay.
Spartacus and Cerberus, and then Leo's 1.
Okay.
They're just like something happened and they both just kind of broke this summer, and like they were totally healthy and then they both were really sick. But what's interesting is Cerberus had this pancreatitis where he had to be in a feeding tube, and it was just this awful. But then it worked and he's fine now. Whereas, and Cerberus is sort of never got better, but maybe he will. So, all right. This is a question from Krista. Did you allow Matt to read the book?
Oh, yes. He read every difficult draft of it. Bless his heart.
And how was that?
It was okay. I mean, it was hard. You could ask him at some point, but it was a lot of figuring out what belonged in the book and what didn't.
Right.
You know, both about my parents and my husband Matt and my kids, and you know, it was really supposed to be a meditation on dogs.
Right.
But it's a memoir, so it was a bit of a balancing act to figure out what actually belonged in this particular book. So he read some early drafts, which were, I think, a lot certainly messier, and but he's always my first reader.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
I love my husband, but he's a good reader, and he is a very smart, but very annoying reader. Like he'll say, like, if you want, you can do like 15 really elaborate things that might make it better. And you're like, just say it's good. Just say it's good.
There are definitely times when I would like to just hear that. I will say about my husband, he's a psychoanalyst, so that perspective on it is really helpful and fascinating, because he just sees things that I don't immediately from that viewpoint. Yeah.
Did you cry while writing the book?
Sobbed.
Yeah.
Like most days. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. And it's hard for me. I mean, I read today, I'm proud of myself for getting through that without crying, especially because Safari, who I read about, he's so old and he's doing well, but I know we don't have like tons of time left with him. But yeah.
Is it just me, or did dogs live longer when we were younger?
I don't know
Because
about
growing
that.
up, I had
I
like
mean,
little dogs that lived to be 20. And now, people are like, if you get to 13, it's amazing, 14.
so it's interesting. So as a kid, I was born into a house with an Afghan hound,
Oh, wow.
a
Are
large
they really
dog.
dumb?
Sorry?
They're really dumb, right?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't experience that with them, with her, Easy, her name was. Um, but she lived a long, she lived to 14. And then I had small dogs until now, then I met Matt and had Booker, and now we just have had large dogs. Large dogs tend to live less long. Although that said, I mean, Booker was 15 and a half when he died, and Safari's, he's 13. He'll be 14 in October. Um, I don't know about that. I really don't. I feel like people are probably prolonging dogs' lives, which,
Yeah.
I don't always know what I think about that, given, whatever's going on with them. I think it's a really important thing to recognize when the right time to say goodbye is, because it's such a gift we can give them.
Yeah.
And, I wish we could be as kind to our humans. But I do think it's a real gift when you just come to the place where
Hmm.
and that's a hard place to come to. It's a hard place to know how to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, can you say something about the difference and similarities between your experience of mothering dogs and humans? Also, how much of the book imagines the inner talk of your dog? Do you wish they could read the book?
um, they've heard the entire book because when I write, I so I write on the computer, but I read it back to myself, and it's always out loud because I want to hear the language. Going back a little bit to what you were saying about prose and the poetry of it, I've always been, whatever I've written, like a word person. So I mean, every word, like, I labor over and need to read out loud and hear myself. And the dogs is so interesting because I like that question. It brings to mind the fact that I did wonder, as I was reading aloud over and over and over about Booker, if Safari, who had lost his best friend, was sitting there just like, what was he thinking? Just hearing Booker's name. I was saying his name over and over. Um, about the mothering of dogs and children, I do think that I've always believed that one of the best lessons in empathy is through animals. Whether you can have your own or visit an animal shelter or go to a farm that's near you, whatever is available to you. I do think part of that mothering definitely was instilled in me and my early animals.
Right.
Yeah,
No, I think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Do you think that, I'm curious to know, do you think that, what was it like when you got the puppy?
Um, so Otter was really my insistence, I think.
Right.
It wasn't like a full, I mean, the kids were excited when we presented a puppy, but um, that he seems like the animal that I kind of forced on the family for myself. Um, so yeah, but I mean, it's sweet that, I've always had this, since Booker and Safari had their relationship, I have had this kind of theory and process I wanted to kind of continue along, where if we overlap dogs, so, we had Booker, we got Safari, Booker died, Safari had Booker in him, and then instilled Booker in Otter. And that actually really has happened. I mean, that Safari and Otter are totally besties. It's really sweet. And Otter's 3 and Safari's 13, almost 14. So I do like that theory of like overlapping dogs, and because they learn so much from each other. If you bring a dog home when there's no other dog, it's not like it can't work. You have to train them, but it's because we had them. It's been a really sweet kind of just generations of these dogs who've kind of known each other.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to include and what not to include? Ask Wendy.
That was the challenge of these 6 drafts. One thing that was helpful was when I sold this book well, I wasn't planning on writing the book, but I sold the book before it was written. So I had to kind of just start with the messiest, just like lay it all out draft.
Right.
And one of my editors, he just kind of kept saying, more dogs, because it was intended to be a meditation on the dogs of my life. So the early drafts definitely had more of my personal life in it, in them, but it was just very clear, in reading through them and also having the other readers, my husband included, it just wasn't appropriate for this book,
Right.
yeah. So I always had to kind of include myself, not let myself like be omitted from the story, but really focus on how each dog kind of helped shape who I am. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I just think that I really relate to that, and it is like always a question of what you put in and
Yeah.
what you choose not to put in.
Right.
Yeah.
But that was a huge challenge.
Right.
Huge
No,
challenge.
I mean, I think I think that's fundamentally normal.
Yeah.
Do your children want or ask if you can get more animals? That's what Matthew just asked.
My husband, Matthew?
Matthew.
No. They asked for cats. So when I met my husband, I had 2 cats and he had Booker.
Okay.
And my 2 cats died in the last few years. My beloved 15-year-old cat died just right at the start of the pandemic. And that was really tough. And I miss cat energy around here, but yeah, my kids are watching right now. And I don't know if they're bringing any cats home, but that is what they've expressed.
You know what's funny is they it's so funny because we had a cat and a dog, and it was like very tough
Yeah.
because the dogs find cat litter to be the most
Oh,
treat known to man. I don't know if maybe your dogs are smarter than this, but
as a kid, my dog used to snack on the litter. Yeah.
I mean, it's
disgusting.
just
Yeah.
the great joy of a dog's life is going into the cat litter and just dragging it all over the house. Yeah. And all right. So Matthew, your husband, I don't think so you're saying no cats for now.
No cats for now.
Okay.
You're welcome, Matt.
I think that's a good move. Amy, without giving away anything too private, was there something you struggled with putting in the memoir that you eventually decided to keep in? And if so, what? And also, what did you decide to keep out?
I think I'll stick with the answer that I kind of already said a little bit, which is I really went through 6 full drafts, um, where again, there was a little bit more about just, childhood, my marriage, my kid, like I just kind of let myself write, which is usually the best way to do it in my experience. Um, and it really, with this book in particular, it kind of, the dogs were the thread. So if I couldn't relate somehow to the dogs in any particular section, um, it kind of got tossed. Um, yeah.
I
So
mean, that yeah, it is such, like, I do think about this all the time because I'm writing a nonfiction book and it's very slow. And but I think a lot about, like, what do you, it's almost what you like, there's stuff in the book where I don't feel there are experiences in the book about Rodney King and people who I don't feel very comfortable writing about as a white Jewish woman who has I've certainly had my crosses to bear, but police brutality has not been one of them.
sure.
So but you can't write a book about that decade without you can't leave out Rodney King. So I think a lot about, like, what do we put in and what do we not, because like leaving that out would be worse than not doing it well.
No, definitely. And
And
I think in a nonfiction, so in a memoir, I guess the comparison, so a memoir and a nonfiction book. In a memoir, I mean, my parents, hi mom and dad, um, my husband, my kids did not choose to write this book.
right.
And I didn't either. It kind of landed on me, which was, of course, like an incredibly exciting development. But at the same time, I really did have to dig deep and think, okay, um, there is like, there's being vulnerable, and there's also plenty of room for appropriate privacy. That's just not,
Well, that's the big, as someone who has
yeah.
spent their whole life being written about
Yes.
nobody
I know
ever
who I'm talking to here. I know.
it is, I mean, it's that, it's funny because we come from such a different generation, right? Where there's like consent, right? There was no consent in the 70s, nobody in the 70s was talking about consent. So you do have this issue of it's funny because I was thinking about this in relation to Cuomo today. Like a lot of people are a lot of older men feel, and this may not be at all relevant, but it's still interesting. But a lot of older men feel very pissed off about the Cuomo stuff. They feel they change the rules, whatever. And I think a lot about, the issue of consent when it comes to writing about people or to our children or to what, was okay parenting. I mean, there's been such a shift, and I'm not saying it's bad at all. I mean, I think it's very much for the good, but it is, I think people get very itchy when when the world changes.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah, which is really so interesting. You guys give me more. Let's have like 2 more questions. Come on, guys. We need 2 more really good Chloe questions here. Oh, all right. I'm going to get one. What are you going to do next?
Oh, just that. So I have a novel that I have a draft of that I wrote actually before all of this. So I might go back to that. It takes place in 1986. So we'll see how I feel about that. But I do feel pretty attached to that character. It's an 11-year-old boy living in Michigan. But I also, like I said, I'll be interested to see how fiction writing feels after this, because it does, I feel like I believe what my husband said, that this could actually be a big turning point in my fiction, having kind of gotten this emotional writing out. So that's my plan right now. Yeah, is to go back to that novel.
It does feel like this is where we are right now as a country in a lot of ways. You know, no, but seriously, a country of mourners, right? Living through a pandemic. Many people have gotten dogs. I mean, there really is a sense you should write, by the way, now that we've moved into me giving you very annoying career advice because I'm such a yenta, but you should write an opinion essay and send it to the New York Times. This is like I've become my grandfather. Not even my grandmother, because my grandmother wouldn't give a shit, but I become my grandfather. You should write an opinion piece about how we are all like a nation of mourners that and the emotional lives that we then connect with our pets. Because I mean, I think it is, I mean, it's certainly where I am.
Yeah.
And if I feel this way, then everyone else must feel this way because we know that no, I'm just kidding. But I think that because we really are so at home in this period of the pandemic and we're so connected to our pets that this really is where people are right now.
No, so I'll just in response to that, the final draft of this came out in March, or I handed it in March as the pandemic was completely just gaining strength, and it was the worst it was at the time. And I really wondered if this was the wrong moment for this book, actually, about pet loss when I don't know how many now, so over 600,000 people, at least in this country, have died. But I also came to kind of see it. I mean, there was definitely the pandemic dogs that all came home and pets in general, and people just relying on their animals being at home. But I also kind of started to think of it as, this is about dogs mainly, but it's about grief and love.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is what everyone's experiencing, right? I mean,
I think
on any day, but yeah. So I'm hopeful that message gets across because where there's grief, there's always love.
Yeah. Well, and I also think it is we're in such a profound moment. All right, here's John. I am so happy you both read and that you both write and that you're both engaged with the world. What more could someone who knew you when you were students could have hoped to see happen? It's not really a question, but I will let it slide. I mean, it is, I mean, we definitely did, I think we definitely did our alma mater, the Bennington MFA program, proud with our continuing writing. Wait, okay. Greenlight Bookstore has a message for me, which I'm not supposed to read out loud. There's a question that someone mistakenly put in the chat. Let me read this question. Oh, here we go. Alan wants to know, Chloe, do you think that dogs acquire some of the idiosyncrasies of their owner? When adopting my husky, Sloan, from SPCA, Southern Pet Center, no, what is SPCA? I wonder. All right. 2 years ago, she seemed to be more comfortable among other dogs in dog parks. But after 2.5 years living with the weirdo loner that I tend to be, she now behaves among dogs as standoffish and awkward as I am around people.
I will personally say that I think yes, I think 100%. Again, Safari, who I read about earlier, he's an anxious dog, and I feel, in retrospect, I feel like I probably could have trained him out of that a little bit more. He has himself come out of a lot of that, just being out in the world, but I'm an anxious person myself, and I feel like, yes, we're kindred souls. I don't know how much I've helped him on that then.
I mean, I have these 3 male dogs, and I knew they were getting better when they all started fighting. So I don't know what that says about me, but I was all of a sudden I hear like, "Arr, ee, ee," and I was like, oh, everybody's feeling better. That's the thing is like, I feel like,
Interacting.
well, I feel like your dogs are better than like the diabetic dog and the puppy are best friends and they play together. And then Cerberus, the pancreatic, just goes over and barks at them. Like, it's not like we have some like magical, it's, I mean, they're great, don't get me wrong. And then Spartacus just pees everywhere. And Leo goes for walks and then comes home and pees in the house too.
But it's so funny to hear you say this again, as the only child to the only child. Conflict still just gets me going. So
Yeah.
like, to hear the other day when we got home, Safari will sometimes just tell Otter, so the older dog will tell the younger dog like no, and he'll just like bark and growl just for a second. I mean, he's really putting him, he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But when I hear it, it's like hearing my kids having an argument. It really gets to me. So I feel like I have to be better about,
I feel like
my vet, speaking of vets before, my lovely vet, Heather, she did tell me like, no, he should be telling him, like, if he growls at him, that's okay. Like, he's telling him what to do. And he's kind of being the alpha or the mom or whatever you want to say. But that's been a life lesson for me to deal with conflict between humans and dogs.
Oh, I love this. All right. I think we are out of questions. Are there any other questions? Does anyone else have a fabulous question? Because we've done it. I mean, we're at 8:27, which
Yeah.
I have to say
Thank you for going.
no, I'm a very hit or miss moderator, but it is fun to get to do it. And it's fun to get to see,
So
because
good to see you.
we went to grad school a million years together. It's very fun to get to see
Yeah,
it.
it's been over 20 years since I've seen you.
Yeah. Oh, wait, we got one more. Oh, no, we got the final thing. So I'm going to let the Greenlight Bookstore people go now. And they're going to sort of they're going to extra us. And I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you, Chloe.
Thank
Greenlight.
you. Have a great trip.
Thanks.
And thank you both so much for that fantastic discussion. It was so heartfelt. I think I'm going to cuddle my pets a little closer tonight. I think we all probably feel that way. So don't forget to buy your copy of What is a Dog in store online at greenlightbookstore.com. And if you missed any of tonight's event, or if you just want to watch it again, we will be posting it to our YouTube channel. So please look out for it there later on. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.